Anybody else have this cold junk stuff going on this past couple weeks? Yeah. Anybody else like me that I'm a little afraid to talk too loud or too much energy today because I sound like a junior high boy going through puberty when I get going. And then, so if we have a few of those moments, you've been warned, okay? Because it's a little rough of a week here. So yesterday, one of my old buddies from Anderson named Troy Snow ran in his first ever full marathon in the Indy Monumental Marathon. That's my hoodie. I did that one time. I did the half, so wearing that in his honor today. He's done several half marathons, which are 13.1 miles, but this was his first 26.2 mile full run. And I was the one who originally got Troy started in running nearly 10 years ago when we did some training together for some triathlons. And every time I see that he finishes another big run, it makes me smile and so proud of him. I've been following along with him. I've been communicating with him during the course of his training over these past months, and it's brought back so many great memories of half marathons and triathlons that I got to participate over these past 10 years. And just to make it clear, I like running, but I don't like it enough to ever want to try a full marathon, all right? I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy, all right? I ran in the Indy half marathon this year and back in 2015. Both experiences were awesome. I loved it and signed up for this coming year as well. You know, that hundreds of thousands of people make their way downtown to either participate or to cheer on the runners. It's an amazing sight to see and to be a part of. And one of the things that the race organizers did that I thought was really cool was that every mile or so throughout the entire run, they had various local music groups set up on the side of the road. And some were heavy metal, some were pop, some were Christian, and some were just noise. Let's be honest, right? And I remember about halfway through the run that there was this group dressed up in pirate gear chanting out various tunes. And as I ran by, the lead female pirate singer shouted, "Keep going. They're waiting for you at the finish line with your free beer." Of course, a bunch of the runners around me cheered in excited anticipation. Now, I like to look for analogies from my running experience and how they apply to life. And over the next mile of the run, I got to thinking about the dumb things that we get caught up racing for in life. Not that they're all necessarily bad things, but they just aren't significant or worthy enough of being the primary thing for which we run our race of life. We run for recognition, we run for fame, we run for fortune, we run for success, we run for accumulated stuff, and the list goes on and on and on, doesn't it? And I think there's a lot of people who, when they cross the finish line of their life runs, they're going to be disappointed when they look back at their life and they see what they spent so much time and energy pursuing. Because in the end, it's going to be as insignificant as getting a free beer as they cross the finish line. Big deal. Who cares? In the end, how much did those things really matter? So as I continued my run, I came across an 80s cover band. Now, how many of you are like me? 80s is where it's at. Yeah. Shane, 2 hands and a foot going up over here with Shane, all right? Now, I got to admit, I wouldn't want my kids listening to half of the music I listened to back then. You just notice that when you're that age, you don't pay attention to the lyrics that much. It's more the beat and the jam and that. And then you get to our age and you're listening to it and your kids are around, you're like, oh my. I did not remember those lyrics. But I remember I was running on the opposite side of the road as I approached this 80s cover band. So I weaved across 15 lanes of runners to get nice and close to do my run by. And as I neared the band, the words of an old familiar classic blared from the speakers, and I heard the wise, profound, life-giving words of Motley Crue. And I found myself laughing as I had been having this deeper discussion with myself for this past mile or two about running our lives with purpose and meaning. And here God finds humor in placing me in front of this band at just the exact time that they are singing these words. Finish the line for me. I'm on my way, home sweet home. Did you ever realize how deeply spiritual Motley Crue was? Did you ever? They got it right. Well, maybe not, but they did on that particular lyric, right? In the grand scheme of things, we are running this race of life with a greater purpose. We each are given this opportunity to choose our own course, or we can choose to join God in the course that He has laid out for us, which has this ultimate prize of eventually living with Him face to face in our ultimate home, sweet home of eternity in heaven. Thousands and thousands of people have gone before us on this journey, and many of their stories are captured in the Bible. And throughout the Bible, we read stories of how God used imperfect, messed up, broken people, and He helped them to go on this journey of faith with courage, with hope, with perseverance, and with purpose. And a number of them are referred to in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament part of the Bible in chapter 11. Men and women who were far from perfect, but who trusted in a perfect God. Men and women who certainly got knocked on their back ends from time to time during their journeys, but they were helped back up on their feet by the loving outstretched arms of a God who was crazy in love with them. And that same God that has so faithfully gone beside those who have gone before us makes Himself available to us today as we follow in His footsteps. So many amazing examples have gone before us, and we should draw strength and we should draw encouragement from their journeys, and we should apply their insights and their wisdom to our own. Hebrews 12:1 gives us these words of wisdom. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. If you were here for week 1 of this series, you might remember that I talked about Abraham. Abraham lived a life that constantly had to place his faith in God. And what Abraham learned from years and years of placing his faith in God was that God always does the right thing. Even when it took a long time, even when what God asked of him seemed absurd, even when he just didn't understand what God was up to. In living a life of faith, Abraham realized that he could completely trust God because God would ultimately always prove Himself to be faithful and do the right thing. Today we're going to talk about another guy named Moses. Now Moses also had a lot to teach us about faith, but his life experience also taught him that living a life of faith means not being content with the status quo. So his words of instruction to us would be this: in order to live by faith, you must often stop playing it safe. Say that with me. In order to live by faith, you must often stop playing it safe. Now, if you're not familiar with Moses, he was around about 14 centuries before Jesus came, and he was part of a group of people called the Hebrews, who were a slave class in Egypt in the time of the great pharaohs. The pharaoh became worried at this booming population of Hebrew people because he feared that they might decide to team up with Egypt's enemies in an effort to overthrow the government. So in a harsh and inhumane verdict, the pharaoh sentenced all newborn Hebrew males to be immediately killed so that they could not grow up to potentially be soldiers that would fight against Egypt. And in an effort to save her son, Moses' mother puts him in a basket and she places him in the water among the reeds near the royal palace. And the Pharaoh's daughter hears him crying. The Pharaoh's daughter hears him crying, and she takes him to be her own son. Now he's got it made. He goes from nothing to highest royalty. Finest goods, servants waiting to serve him, the best education, a gold-plated chariot with GPS, XM radio, and a flip-out 42-inch high-def 1080p screen. I mean, he had it made. He's got this nice, safe lifestyle, and he could have just cruised through life without a care in the world. But then something happens. When he's around 40 years old, Moses is walking about, and he's seeing how his people, the Hebrews, are being treated. He sees this Egyptian foreman beating a Hebrew slave, and it infuriates him. And he looks around to make sure that no one is looking, and he kills this Egyptian, and he tries to hide the body. He had hoped that the Hebrews would see him as being used by God to rescue them, but they didn't. And on top of that, others did witness the killing. And when he learned that the pharaoh was searching for him to kill him, he ended up fleeing Egypt and running for his life. And then Moses spends the next 40 years of his life in Midian as a foreigner. And he gets married, he has 2 children, he's a shepherd by trade now. His lifestyle was certainly different there than it had been in Egypt. But again, it had become nice and safe with nothing to push him out of his comfort zone. And then something quite unusual happened. One day, while he's out taking care of his flock of sheep, he sees a bush that's on fire, but it's not burning up. And he looks at it for a while, and then he has a profound response. Huh, will you look at that? I don't know. It doesn't tell us what. That might have been my response in that situation. I don't know. All we're told is that Moses got closer to get a better look. It turns out that it's the angel of the Lord appearing in the flame in the burning bush. And in Exodus 3, we read, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Are you kidding me? I mean, you know, Linda tells us all the time, put yourself into the story. Are you kidding me? Flaming bush, not catching fire, and it's talking to you. Here I am. This is all normal, right? You see a, like, are you kidding me? Because if this had been me, we would have been reading the text today. It says, when the Lord saw that Chris had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Chris, Chris. And Chris said, never mind, Chris just ran away like a screaming little girl. Like, that's what the text would say today. All right? But there was something about that encounter. There was something about that calling of his name by God that had Moses' full attention. It goes on to say this, do not come any closer, God said. Not a problem, Chris is already a half mile away. So, all right. Come closer. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And at this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt. You should take time this week to read this story. It's in Exodus chapters 3 and 4. And what you will see is not a mighty man of God saying, here I am, God, I'm your man, send me. What you're going to see is a man who is scared, who has doubt, who has low self-esteem in some ways, and has a low trust level in God. What he becomes, though, is the leader of God's people, the Israelites, a great leader, the writer of the first 5 books of the Bible, and one of the giant heroes of our faith. But what he had to learn between where he was and where he would end up is that in order to live by faith, he had to stop playing it safe. And that's God's message to us here today as well. Playing it safe can cause a lot of dangerous consequences. When I say playing it safe, I'm not saying we're supposed to get reckless with our lives. I'm not talking about some spontaneously, poorly thought out reaction to a situation. That's what Moses did in his early years when he allowed his emotion to get the better of him, and he killed an Egyptian as a result. What I'm talking about is when we intentionally put things in place in our lives that don't cause us to get outside of our comfort zone and require us to really trust God to show up in order for something to happen. We like things to all make sense, to be able to do things in our own power, to avoid pain and suffering of any kind at all cost. And as a result, we live safe lives. The problem is that if safe is your priority, it often leads to God not being able to use you in a powerful, meaningful way, because safe causes all kinds of problems. The first thing you need to realize is that safe will keep you trapped in the past. Safe will keep you trapped in the past. We all have stuff from our past that we're not proud of, right? All of us have that. The list is really, really long for some of us that have been around a little longer too, right? The older we get, that list gets longer and longer and longer. We have things we've done that the enemy of our souls has us convinced has to be a part of our lives forever, that there's no escape from it. And as a result, we play it safe in our lives because we don't want to risk those things or a particular thing from being drudged up again, to remind us that we aren't enough, to remind us that we blew it and that we're going to blow it over and over and over again. You following with me? Something coming to mind maybe in your life? Something you've been through, something you did, something you said, something that happened? I mean, I think about this. I think about I was thinking about this whole idea of slavery and everything, kind of like, the old boulder that's got the shackles, with the link chain to the prisoner around that. I mean, I want you to think of that boulder as whatever that event is, whatever that is that's happened in your history. And each year, and for me, I think about this when I went through my divorce in 2001, that every year one of the first things, and this is just me being totally real, every year, like one of the first things after the first of the year, when we get a brand new year, one of the first things I'm thankful for is I'm 1 year farther removed from that. Anybody follow me on that? But the problem is this, is sometimes you've got this boulder, and using this story of my divorce for my example, whatever it is for your example, and every year we get further and further away from it. But the problem is, if we don't break free from thinking our identity is found here, all that's happening is there's another link in the chain getting added. So maybe the years are going by, and you're moving further and further away on the timeline, but you are still just as linked to that today as you were when it happened. Does that make sense? Our God is a chain breaker. And if you play it safe, and you're always worried about, man, I've had that through the years. People being like, dude, what are you doing as a pastor? You've been through a divorce. What are you doing as a pastor? That's come up a lot through the years. Gosh, what if God gives these opportunities these big opportunities in front of people and everything like that. Gosh, but what if they find out my story? What if they find out I blew up my marriage and I did? Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, there's those things. And again, what am I doing? I'm just showing that I'm tethered to that still. And that is not what God wants for any of us. Jesus came to break those kinds of chains. While that's something in your past will always be there as something that you went through, it doesn't have to remain something that you remain chained to. Some of you need to hear that today. I remember going to the doctor's office probably, 15 years ago or so, and I had kind of it's just like a small cyst underneath the skin on my back shoulder, but it had just really gotten inflamed and was really sore to the touch, and went in to see the doctor, and he said, okay, we're just going to go ahead and cut that out. And that was not fun. I did not enjoy that. And I remember looking at it afterwards, like, you ever do that, like, you have to clean the dressings and all that stuff. But how many of you, like, are gory like that, where you like to look at that kind of, like, you look for, yeah, all right. Honest moments here. Hey, look around, stay away from those people. Those of you who are, but you look at that thing and it's just like, oh, that is not pretty, right? After that's been taken care of, that is not pretty. But here's where, that was 15 years ago. And what was a painful wound then is simply a scar now. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't affect my body in any kind of negative way. It's simply a reminder of something I went through. And that's what Jesus wants to do for you. He wants you to turn your wounds into scars. The enemy wants to convince you that your past will always be a wound, that you will always be marked by it, that it will always be ugly. But Jesus wants to turn it into a scar so that you never forget what happened, because it made you who you are today, but it doesn't have to continue to hurt you and define you in a negative way. Does that make sense? Isaiah 43 says, forget about what's happened. Don't keep going over old history. Be alert. Be present. I am about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I am making a road through the desert. I am making rivers in the Badlands. If you will allow him to, Jesus wants to bring out the bolt cutters and set you free from being held hostage to your past. He is ready to do something new in you, but you have to decide to stop playing it safe and hiding in the shadows of your past. Playing it safe will keep you trapped in the past. Playing it safe will also keep you satisfied with today. The danger of satisfaction is that it can make us so complacent or content with the way things are. It can be easy at times to feel comfortable with where things are in life. And when that happens, we can just settle in for the long haul, can't we? The problem is, you and I were never created to just settle in. We were created by God to live vibrant lives that are constantly changing as we grow in our knowledge of Him and as we are transformed and changed by Him from the inside out. Moses had two significant opportunities to just settle in. The first was when he lived in Egypt and he had it made by all worldly standards. It would have been so easy to just settle in and soak up the good life. But when Moses saw the Egyptian beating the Hebrew, something inside of him stirred. A holy discontent welled up inside of him, and he realized he had to do something about it. He could no longer be satisfied with the status quo. Something had to change. When was the last time that you had a holy discontent for something that you saw in the world around you? When is the last time that you had a holy discontent for something that you see in the world around you? Something that just got you stirred up or gets you stirred up and shakes up your comfortable life. Something that pushes you to take some kind of action in response to the need. Some of us need to have a holy discontent with our marriages because they're not in a good place right now, and we shouldn't be satisfied with that. Some of us need to have a holy discontent with our finances because they're a complete mess and they need to get fixed. Some of us need to have a holy discontent with some kind of a social issue because people around us are falling through the cracks and people need to reach out to them and lend a helping hand. If we don't have some kind of holy discontent, safe will keep us satisfied with today. So safe will keep us trapped in the past. It'll keep us satisfied with today. And safe will keep us afraid of tomorrow. Safe will keep us afraid of tomorrow. When Moses was told that God wanted to use him to go back and rescue God's people from the hands of the Egyptians, Moses wasn't even close to being ready to step up to that calling. Again, go back, read Exodus 3 and 4 this week. His first response was, "Who am I?" He remembers his first go-around in Egypt. It didn't end well. The Hebrews didn't see him as their hero. The Egyptians wanted to kill him. Understandably, it was not the place that he was looking to return to. Then he goes to another. What if they don't believe me? Now we go from insecurity to fear. What if they don't believe me? God performs a miracle, turns a staff into a serpent and back again. Still not enough to convince him. I'm not a good speaker. Lack of confidence. Eventually, Moses runs out of objections, and finally he gets to the point where he's just brutally honest. In verse 13, he says, "Oh, Master, please send somebody else." Honesty, finally. Have you ever done that? Have you ever seen something that needed to be done? Probably even thought it was a good idea, as long as somebody else was doing it. I don't know how many, 20 years of ministry. I couldn't tell you how many hundreds of times people have come to me through the years with brilliant ideas. But it doesn't take long for me to realize that what they're saying is, "Chris, I've got a great idea for you to do." And one of the first things I always do is go, "And how can you make this happen?" Put it back in their court. And unfortunately, so many of those great ideas die right then and there. Because people who, just like Moses, they come up with every excuse in the book as to why they shouldn't be the ones to move forward with an idea or with a solution. Instead, they choose to play it safe. They choose to stay in their comfort zones instead of trusting God to show up and do something awesome. Safe is a place that will keep us from stepping out to where God wants us to be. There's a story in Matthew 14 where the disciples of Jesus are out in a boat, and Jesus left the shore and he walks on water to join them. And in the morning fog, he looks like a ghost, and his disciples were scared. And Jesus says, "It is I, don't be afraid." And instead of waiting for Jesus to get to the boat, Peter does something really strange. He says, "If it's you, Jesus, call me out to you on the water." Again, putting myself in the story. Are you kidding me? All right? Peter, look around. It's so much safer to just stay in the boat. But more important, get this, more important to Peter than being safe was being wherever Jesus was. And if Jesus called him out on the water, even with all of the fears that would come along the way, as he made his way out to Jesus, Peter knew that being with Jesus was the best place anyone could possibly be. And if Jesus is calling you to do something that is going to require you to get out of your safe boat, to get out of your comfort zone, then know he is already there waiting for you. You don't have to say, "Jesus, come with me." He's already there waiting for you to take a step out to where God wants you to be. I wonder where God may be calling you to step out in faith right now in life. It might be at work. It might be at school. It might be in your marriage. It might be in another relationship. You need to be reminded that Jesus is already there, waiting for you to step out in faith and join him in what he is doing in the world around us, waiting for us to join him in his ultimate purpose of changing the world and drawing people to himself and to eternity with our Heavenly Father. Are you ready to take that step? Let's pray. God, where we ended that song just now, that is the desire of our hearts. To Jesus be the glory. And there are so many things in our life that get in the way of making that a reality. And it's something that we have to think about every day with intentionality to fight against, because the world around us sends us a very, very different message, a very self-absorbed message. And if we want this to be about your glory, then we've got to go at it every day with the right mindset. So God, I pray for this week, would you help each of us to wake up in the morning, to remind ourselves that we are doing this, we are living this life. Ultimately, it's for your glory. So show us the next steps, what that needs to look like, and how we need to get out of the safe zones that we've been operating in for far, far too long. We love you, Jesus. Be with our church family in the days and weeks and months to come. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Prayer team over here, if you'd like anything particular to be prayed about, I'll be available up front. Otherwise, we'll see you guys, Wednesday. Is this the last one? No, 2 more. Oh, man. She's like, no. Okay, 2 more this week and next week. So we'll see a bunch of you on Wednesday.